and welcome to today's UK Column News. It's Wednesday the 15th of April, just after 1 o'clock. Your host today, myself, Mike Robinson, and John Shackleton. And joining us on Skype is Justin Walker. So, hello Justin, are you there?
I'm here, yes. Hello everybody. Hello.
Good stuff. Okay, look, we're going to lead off today with this article about Harry Beckhoff. Now, we did mention the passing of Harry Beckhoff in mid-March at the time. But I just wanted to highlight this tribute to him in thisiswiltshire.co.uk. Please go and have a read of that if you can, because this man was a great campaigner for many years. Began his career as a wartime code breaker, and then never really stopped campaigning on various issues ever since. So please go and have a look at that article. It's a great write-up on a great man. Okay, can I just say something about yesterday? We understand that the live stream did crash at 1 o'clock yesterday, and for a few minutes people didn't receive the programme. I do apologise about that. That was beyond our control. Contrary to some of the comments in the chat box, we were aware of it, but of course it's a live programme. We keep going, and we just attempt to fix it as we can. So Nick did a fantastic job getting it up and running again as quickly as possible. And that was that. If it happens again, well, we may suspect external influences, since it always seems to happen at 1300 on the dot. Okay, this is a fantastic story. This is from the Network for Police Monitoring. New court charges will have significant impact on low-income protest defendants. And really, this is a second second string to the bow of the new charges that are coming into the courts. And we were speaking to a lady yesterday who is attempting to get a court judgment for the very simple thing of which she's got a public authority who is refusing to give her personal information under the Data Protection Act. She is attempting to get a court order in order to encourage them to do so, because the Information Commissioner's Office will not proceed, despite the fact that they have found against the organisation concerned. And what she has discovered is that the charge for applying for this court order has risen from £50 to £160 or so. Now, we mentioned this a couple of weeks ago because this was in the mainstream press as well, that court charges were rising by up to 600%. But really what's happening here, isn't it, John, is that there is an absolute restriction on justice for most people now since this latest thing.
I think people aren't taking it seriously enough in terms of what's happening within our court systems in the UK. Actually, well, in the whole of the UK, they've basically changed all the financial structure. I've said this a long time ago. They've become a financial institution, so they're no longer concerned about law, but they're concerned about how much money they get in, and this proves it. I mean, I've been talking to the Law Society today, and I've talked to the Magistrates Association. They're going to come back to me. But my concern is that they are acting illegally because it's in a manner they're trying to obtain finances through deception,
right,
which is illegal. This is it's a long story, and we can't cover it all on this programme because we're out live and we've got a number of areas to cover. But we're doing some digital books now, and we're going to do some stuff in the future to try and help people out. I think potentially it's going to be a case that we're going to have to take a court to court.
Yes.
And I've said this before, because a statute is legal legislation, rule of society given the force of law by consent of the governed. Us, we're governed, but we've got to give that consent.
Right.
And we talk about the Constitution, something that I've studied for a long time, many years, and I've got various qualifications in commercial law and contract law. But also what is significant, and Guy Taylor uses this, and so do I when we're in court, is what Lord Diplock says. And I've said this before on the programme. It says, due administration of justice requires first that all citizens should have unhindered access to the constitutionally established courts. Unhindered. Now, if you're charging somebody £1,200 or something, that's hindering the process, isn't it? So if you're on a low income, or you're a student, or I'll tell you even worse, if you're a protester and you go out, you've got the fracking protesters, I suppose we're protesters in some manner, protesting against the government, then they will drag you in court. Let me tell you, this is a fact. They'll drag you in court, and if you're found guilty of being a protester now, you'll be charged, I think, what did I work it out? £750. So if you want to protest...
So Nick, if we can just put this article back up again. What this is a second raft of charges, aside from the ones that were announced a few weeks ago, which were charges for accessing the law in the first place. This is a new raft of charges where basically what they're doing is they are, whereas in the past, if you were taken to court, there was obviously a cost in bringing a case to court. In the past, that cost was covered by the taxpayer. Now what they're doing is that they're putting that cost onto the defendant if they are found guilty. So let's say you are at a fracking protest, and let's say the Manchester police, as they demonstrated time and time again, perhaps incited some kind of behaviour, or they attempted to prosecute somebody for a certain type of behaviour. If that person was found guilty for simply protesting and then being beaten up by the police, there is the potential that they would then incur up to a £1,200 charge.
Or if you demonstrate, you know, we've had marches up and down the country on the 11th against paedophilia, quite rightly. And these protesters now can potentially be taken to court, and the police can... we know what the police are like. Not all police are bad, but we know that the police, they're in a situation where now they're financially led. So what's going on is they might manipulate something. I don't want to play act actually with either one of us being a police officer. I don't think you'd appreciate that. But if you get these corrupt police officers that arrest you, they think, well, they're going to be encouraged now to arrest the protesters, because every protester they arrest is potentially £700 in this system. Maybe that's a stealth tax as well.
Yes.
You know.
So
but we're going to go more into detail on this, and as I say, we can't do it
in due course. Now the legislation that the government is attempting, or the Ministry of Justice is saying it justifies this, is the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, which was clearly enacted in the last couple of months. It's this clause here, which seems to be the key one, 21C, amount of criminal courts charge. A charge ordered to be paid under 21A must be of the amount specified by the Lord Chancellor by regulations. So this is effectively, in the case of charges under criminal courts, is an enabling act whereby the Lord Chancellor can make it up as he goes along.
He can decide the figure.
So at this point, it also says, by the way, that he must seek to secure that an amount specified in respect of a class of case does not exceed the relevant court costs reasonably attributable to a case of that class. So perhaps he's limited a little bit, but really they have the power here to really make it up. So they just decide, well, this particular court case incurs these particular costs, and so this is what you're going to be charged. And what occurred to me was that it may be fair enough to say that if somebody has committed a criminal offence or found guilty of a criminal offence, that the cost of their prosecution should move from the taxpayer to them because they are the criminal. But in fact, it won't move to them, will it? Because in many cases, they will receive a custodial sentence, so they'll end up in prison. So they're not going to be in a position to actually pay that. So who's going to end up paying this extra fee? It's going to be the family, who's really an innocent,
bystander.
Quite often an innocent bystander in this. The families are going to end up with bailiffs at their doors and so on. And perhaps this actually encourages further criminal activity. So I think this is going to have a pretty serious effect.
Well, it's completely against the Constitution. We all know that our viewers are quite versed now in constitutional common law. The Bill of Rights and the Magna Carta, just two, and proceedings of Westminster as well. So it does need address, and it needs serious address. At the moment in the office, we have got a team that are working on it, and we're discussing it with the Magistrates Association and the courts as we speak.
Any comments, Justin?
I'm just going to simply say once again, I mean, having seen that dreadful video up in Manchester of the police acting as corporate bully boys, acting on behalf of the bailiffs and going in there, I mean, this is just part of the corporate takeover, and it's simple that money and profit now comes before justice. I'm hoping people will wake up, because as I said last time I was on the show, the whole thing now, we're galloping towards the sort of Orwellian state that they've got planned for us. It's not a case of stepping stones and tiptoeing. They're bloody galloping towards it, and it's in your face.
Right. So, of course, we're heading into an election. You could be forgiven for not realising that we're heading into election because there's almost no campaigning going on. But parties are starting to issue their manifestos at long last within days of the thing happening. And yesterday we had the Tory party, their manifesto called Weak Leadership, a Bogus Economic Plan and a Darker, Less Secure Future, as you can see there. Because everything that these people say every word they use is 180 degrees meaning from the words that they choose. And so I just thought we would have a look at a few of the key items out of this. We talked about their plans for housing yesterday, but I wanted to have a look at some of this. They're going to reform human rights law and our legal system, and what they're going to do, they're basing this on Muslim terrorism, they say, and they're going to scrap the Human Rights Act. Well, you might say that's a good thing. But they're going to introduce a British Bill of Rights, because we don't have a Bill of Rights, Justin, as you very well know. There hasn't been one in place since 1689. No. And this will break the formal link between British courts and the European Court of Human Rights. They say it's going to make our own Supreme Court the ultimate arbiter of human rights matters in the UK. And they will continue the £375 million modernisation of the court system, reducing delay and frustration for the public. Now, can I just say that there is actually no access to the courts for the public at the moment. If you try to go to your local county court at the moment, if you try to go to your local county court at the moment, you'll find that there is no public access anymore. And we're hearing that in a number of cases, people are actually being refused access to the courts, even to sit in the public gallery. So, they're going to scrap the Human Rights Act and introduce a British Bill of Rights. You've got to applaud that, don't you, Justin?
Well, I'm just going to say this. To me, you can literally say over the last 50 years, criminals have been running our country. And the first tenet of common law is that the criminal is never allowed to get away with his crime. Now, as far as I'm concerned, when we talk about county courts, we talk about what we on magistrates, we talk about everything that Guy and others have exposed. Anything they propose has to be unlawful because they are criminals. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm very simple about this. We literally go back 50 years and let's sort out the good stuff that's been passed from the bad stuff, and common law prevails. So, in my humble opinion, everything we're hearing now proposed by the Conservatives, by Labour, we know bottom line is that these people are traitors, these people are criminals, and in some cases actual paedophiles. And as far as I'm concerned, any proposals coming from them, we can just nullify and say, not on, mate. You guys are going to be arrested and you're going to be answerable to the law.
Right, so the next item I just thought, which is a piece of sheer hypocrisy coming out of this thing, was we will protect victims and support the vulnerable. We've already introduced a new victims code and taken steps to protect vulnerable witnesses and victims. And I'm just going to say, if anybody is thinking of voting Conservative, if before you think about casting that vote, you perhaps ask your candidate and just use the words Melanie Shaw and ask them how that fits in with this diatribe of nonsense that's in the Conservative manifesto. I'm very interested to get some feedback on that.
Absolutely.
Right, the next one then, we will this is another interesting one. We'll transform the relationship between the police and the public. So under the guise of diversity and introducing black and ethnic minority officers, they're going to basically introduce further fast-track schemes such as Police Now, and they're going to offer top graduates a new route into policing. And of course what that does is that instead of individuals beginning as a police constable and actually learning the job on the ground, as it were, they are receiving certain types of training before they ever go into the police force. And what they say is this is for top graduates. They don't say what kind of graduates. Is this for law graduates or is it for common purpose graduates? I think I know the answer to that. And they're going to use the Police Innovation Fund to accelerate the adoption of new technologies, including mobile devices that will transform the service the public receives. In other words, they're going to shut down the public interface between the personal interface between the public and individual police officers or police constables, or even somebody on a front desk, and instead you're going to have to use Skype or something to contact the police.
This is right. There's a lot of police stations where you go to now, and including courts, like we're saying, you have the right to access a court and a right to have a fair trial. But they're stopping the public even looking at the courts, so the courts are becoming private courts.
Yes.
Now the police, we all know, are private. They're a corporation in themselves, but now they're being funded in new tactics to divert really what's going on, and it's not to protect us, it's to protect them. And when I say them, well, our viewing audience are intelligent enough to know who them are. That's the judges, the corrupt paedophiles, the MPs. I mean, you look at the MPs that are going round at the moment, they've got armed guards. Why have they got armed guards?
Yeah.
Are they a little bit scared of something? Are they scared of the people that they should be serving?
Yeah. Justin?
Well, I'm just going to say, refer you back to that video again in Manchester last week, and the scruffiness of the police and the disjointed effect on, they just don't seem to have that sort of continuation the police used to have. And I emphasize, you cannot beat doing the job properly by going on the beat, learning the job at the hard face, at the whole cold face, and then gradually working your way up with bags of experience behind you. You can't beat that. So as far as I'm concerned, this is just more moves to create a corporate private police force that's going to morph itself into sort of security, Group 4S or whatever, G4S. So it's, again, as I said, we are galloping towards a totalitarian state.
And of course, no solutions from the Green Party, as it were. So their manifesto also released yesterday. Here's the front page of it. You're pretty familiar with these people.
Yes, I will.
What's your view of the overall manifesto, and particularly their monetary options?
I'm going to have to confess a great degree of sadness here. I actually joined the Green Party back in 1978. I left in 1992 because of the infighting. And I went along with so much because I trusted the people who were telling us the problems we were facing, including man-made global warming. So, there's still much that I appreciate that the Green Party is good for, human scale economics and all that side of things. But to a very large extent, they've been hoodwinked. A lot of decent people, very naive people, but been hoodwinked. And it's just very, very sad. Now, their economics, well, there was a ray of light. I'll just read the 3 lines here. Green Party manifesto. All national currency, both in cash and electronic form, will be created free of any associated debt by a national monetary authority, NMA, that is accountable to Parliament. Well, the first half of that was brilliant. Look at that. Will be created free of any associated debt. Marvellous. And then they go on to talk about national monetary authority, which mirrors what Positive Money has been saying, and the New Economics Foundation. See, what's interesting, you've got the sort of green movement, the loose green movement, and as I said, you've got the Green Party, the New Economics Foundation, and you've got the Positive Money. And Positive Money, Ben Dyson will tell you, no, we don't have any political agendas. We are here to find a way of creating money that's debt-free, etc., etc. But there is a political agenda, because he supports the thesis of man-made global warming, which we all know to be a complete scam, bad science. They support Agenda 21, broadly speaking, local currencies and transition towns. In other words, they are very much hooked into the global agenda, the New World Order's global agenda, to push humanity into cities and towns where we can all be controlled. Now, this talk about the Green Party talking about a national monetary authority, well, what's that all about? We are proposing with the Bradbury that the government and Parliament issues and basically controls the money supply. And
therefore they're directly accountable.
Exactly, and transparent. Now, this National Monetary Authority, I've yet to discover how it's going to be formed, who's going to run it, who says it's going to be on it. It just sounds like a jolly good quango. And more to the point, and this is the sad part, the Positive Money and the Green Party won't accept the Bank for International Settlements, the evidence that the central banking cartel is coordinated by the Bank for International Settlements, because they say, the Green Party actually believe the Bank of England, a central bank, is going to have a role to play in all of this. So they're not accepting what is actually happening at the moment. They refuse to even look at it. So it's very sad. I mean, I'm going to use the words. They are, to my way of thinking, controlled opposition. They are, if you like, providing people with a false hope that yes, we can have debt-free, interest-free money, but they're not following it through like the Bradbury was. Bradbury was an actual historical precedent. It worked, and it worked so well that the bankers had to stop it from working.
Justin, how many years did that go on? Was that 20 years or
it was
30?
obviously started in 1914, and I think it went on to about 1926. It was phased out. When Lloyd George made the decision to go back to accepting war loans, that was done in 1915. It didn't just cut off the Bradbury pound. It was allowed to gradually phase its way out. But I think they printed £300 million worth in 1914. I think that's the figure.
Yeah, so we had 30 years where it was a success, and we were.
Well, I mean, it was, everyone accepted it. I mean, as I said, when you read that book, Thomas Johnston, The Finances and the Nation, he said everybody accepted it and there was no inflation. It worked.
Yeah.
So if we had something that worked and was simple, and even a 10-year-old can understand it, even I can understand it, I think I should say. And listen, if somebody said to me 5 years ago, Justin, you'll be appearing on UK Column Live talking about money, I'd have laughed. But I can understand it. It's common sense. Why the Green Party wants to make it more complicated, and Positive Money and the New Economics Foundation, I just don't know. And the only conclusion I can come to is that the leadership of these organisations have been corrupted in some way.
Well, I think if we give a slightly alternative view than that, if we want to be nice to them, it may be that they actually accept the argument that giving this power over to politicians is a potentially risky thing to do, in the sense that they'll play politics with it, particularly at election time.
Yeah.
But my argument on this has always been, and you can disagree with me if you choose, that a policy like the Bradbury has to have the backing of the people of the country, and if people aren't prepared to stand up and hold their politicians to direct account, then they get what they deserve.
Yeah.
So if politicians get the power to issue credit through the Bradbury pound or whatever the policy is called when it happens, and they misuse that, then that should simply be a criminal offence. Well,
let's be honest. I would be very unhappy if political parties had the power to control money supply. I want to see a parliament made up of independent members of parliament. And when you have a debate, you have a real debate, and there are no prearranged agendas in smoke-filled rooms or whatever beforehand. In other words, you will have a parliament that looks at what needs to be done, and they will create the liquidity needed for a happy and prosperous nation. And it's as simple as that. And taxation would be targeted to remove any overheating, to prevent any inflation. It's just common sense. That's all it is.
It is, and I think the way to do it, and I'd like to speak to our viewers out there and our members who have been giving us excellent feedback over the last few months, with some of the work that people are trying to do out there in society. But, the question is, what are you going to do about it? Not you personally, Justin, but what are our viewers going to do about it? They call different members of the team and say, well, look, what you're doing, we're trying our damnedest to break down these walls. And we go to the public and our friends and our family and that and say, what are you going to do about it? Let's stop this sitting on your backside and doing nothing, and get out there and try and do something like Response does out there. And I work closely with Response and other groups, and Guy and the Peacekeepers are all doing some fantastic work and making massive sacrifices, So if we all join together, and I know I keep banging on about this, and I'm getting bored of listening to myself as well, as you are, but if we all gather together, there's millions of us, there's absolutely millions to us. Talk to your mothers, talk to your fathers, talk to your brother, talk to your sister, your cousins and uncles, and let's unite and get this done. Let's get it sorted.
Well, that's probably a good opportunity for me to mention the flying columns, because it's absolutely imperative before this general election finishes that we actually go up to some of these wrongdoers and question them about the Bradbury, about the courts and what Guy is finding out. And, let's get the basics out to these people and challenge them and say, look, what are you doing about this? Why are you allowing us? I mean, today in the Daily Telegraph, it said that the interest on our borrowing from the private banks who create money out of thin air and then charge interest on something that doesn't exist, at the moment it's now amounting to £1 billion a week, the interest on something that never actually existed. So you have all these MPs and all these candidates running around say we're going to find 8 billion for the NHS and 4 billion for defence or whatever it is, and we are throwing 52 billion pounds a year away on interest on something that never actually existed in the first place.
Well, I think it's actually worse than that, Justin, because the Debt Management Office is rolling much of this debt over. So in fact, this is an increasing situation as time goes on. We're not actually paying the debt down. They're talking about reducing the deficit, and they're going to do that through austerity and potentially tax increases. But they focus on the deficit and they never talk about the debt. And so they're rolling over the debt, and it keeps rolling over and it keeps increasing year on year. And, we're just building up a hellish situation for the next generation.
And the bankers as well. Look at the bankers. None of them have been put in prison for money laundering. And we all know, I think everybody that watches this programme, including ourselves in the office and yourself, Justin, we all know the banks are money laundering, don't we?
We do, yeah. Can I just say, this is a very important, this came on the news today. I got it from America. The 6 too-big-to-fail banks in the US have $278 trillion of exposure to derivatives. And they're talking about this being the debt bomb that's ready to explode. Now, we know that the powers that be are engineering a big collapse. And I do want to emphasize this point. If there is a sudden collapse, an electronic Bradbury can support the whole lawful British economy in a matter of seconds. It took 2 days in 1914 to get the Bradbury pound in position. Today, electronically, we can have the Bradbury pound in position in a matter of seconds to support the entire lawful British economy.
Couldn't agree more. Right, we're just going to finish off with Justin now, but I just wanted to highlight this article on the Inquiring Minds website because it relates to what we've just been talking about. Green Party leaders expose themselves as cards puppets, frightened to challenge the banking elite head on. Encourage everybody to go and have a look at that one. Justin, thank you very much for joining us. And,
thank you for having me again.
Hopefully we'll see you again next week, maybe, or the week after.
Yeah, we'll certainly manage to find some way of doing it. No problem.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, now yesterday afternoon, I spoke to Mark Anderson from American Free Press. He's in the United States. We covered a whole range of different, a few different subjects, but we began with talking about the US presidential election, which of course, people are declaring themselves as candidates at this stage. And unlike here, they seem to be campaigning for a lot longer. So this is what Mark had to say. Welcome, Mark. How are you doing?
Very well, bro. Very well, Mike.
Yeah, I know I've been away for 2 weeks, but come on.
I wanted to call you Brian. I'm already programmed, but it's great to be here for American Free Press to help you decipher these blizzards of headlines each day that we're inundated with. So great to be here.
It's moving along pretty quickly, and of course the thing which is moving along very quickly now is the announcements of people running for the presidential election in 2016. And contrary to the United Kingdom, where basically we have an election but nobody really campaigns, your elections tend to begin quite early. So here we are, 18 months away from the actual election, and campaigning is more or less beginning?
That's correct. We have a cult of presidential personality here. It's pretty unhealthy overall. It's a spectacle. It's interesting at times, even entertaining, but overall, it shouldn't be this way. The system itself is the problem. But yeah, Hillary, we have a whole field of people.
Yes.
But
sorry. So the first major candidate to announce was Hillary Clinton, who we have a nice picture of here. I mean, what do you think her chances are? Actually, has she damaged herself sufficiently with the email scandal?
Well, first of all, yeah, she's the first to announce on the Democratic side. Rand Paul on the Republican side beat her by a day or two. And Rand is an interesting one. We'll talk about him in a moment. But with Hillary, you have a media that's obsessed with the fact that she's a woman and that she used to be the first lady when her husband, Bill Clinton, was president. And therefore, they think it's just a football through the goalpost, a slam dunk that she should and could be president. They completely ignore the Clinton scandals, the myriad Clinton scandals that happened in the 90s. And these were serious matters. The death of Vincent Foster, one of their closest aides and friends, was very suspicious. A lot of very criminal actions have been tied to the Clintons, not just malfeasance and not just, missteps, but very serious matters that the U.S. media is willing to sweep under the rug at all costs.
And why is that, Mark? What is going on there? Is it just that the Clinton family is considered political establishment and therefore untouchable?
Yeah, that's part of it. They've ensconced themselves into the establishment. When a relatively unknown Bill Clinton, who was Arkansas governor, went to the Bilderberg meeting in Baden-Baden, Germany in 91, the next thing you know, he was president, and suddenly Bill Clinton is a household name, having been plastered on Time magazine and in the New York Times and whatnot. And so, yeah, there's this kind of volcanic rise of the Clintons from their relative obscurity in Arkansas. But the scandal started way back then, and they've been unrelenting. Hillary Clinton is a very, very dubious, dishonest person, and I'm being kind right now.
Right.
And the U.S. media, you'd never know this.
So I was going to ask what kind of, it's kind of a rhetorical question, actually, but maybe you can just give us your thoughts anyway. What kind of president do you think she would make?
Terrible comes to mind.
But is she going to be a warmonger? Is she, because her activities over the so-called death of Bin Laden were pretty. They didn't come across. She didn't come across smelling of roses out of that. I don't think her reaction to what was going on as she was watching on the television screen. So is she going to be a warmonger?
It would seem. I see no reason to think otherwise. The highest office she ever held was Secretary of State relatively recently. Her behavior and role in the Benghazi scandal has still yet to be really determined.
Yes.
It seems that guns were being run out of Libya through Turkey into Syria to the Free Syrian Army that just magically one day became ISIS or ISIL, which no one had ever heard of one day, and suddenly they were a household name virtually the following week. She's been very dodgy on that whole Benghazi scandal. She's trying to play innocent, but it's clear that before we would even think about making her president, we'd have to know what she did exactly in that scandal, having had that very high office, Secretary of State. And so that's a huge question mark hanging over her head that, again, the media, along with her past scandals, just isn't willing to tackle. It's all the cult of personality here.
Okay, so the next person you mentioned, of course, was Rand Paul, son of Ron Paul, and he has now declared. So what are your thoughts on him?
Well, Rand Paul is, to his credit, cut from a somewhat different cloth. His dad wasn't perfect. I could find things to pick apart about his monetary ideas, but he's a isolationist, which actually means non-interventionist, which actually means wisdom in foreign policy.
Is he as libertarian as his father?
Not quite. He's made some noises about being a little bit more aggressive militarily, but I think that's largely rhetoric to please the neoconservatives and the pro-Zionists that are so heavily embedded in our system. He has to be able to pass the smell test, so he sounds a little bit more hawkish on the surface. But I think that he's a lot like his father, but not completely. The media is going to, and they already are trying to label him as an isolationist who's going to build a wall around the country and all our troops would come home all at once and we'd never set foot in another nation as long as we live. This is the rhetoric that the pro-interventionist media and establishment uses here to try and tar and feather Rand Paul or anyone like him. And then they're getting him on like Fox News and they're playing that game where the reporters ask him a machine gun fire way of questioning, and they talk over him, and they don't even give him a chance to answer, and they frustrate him. And then he talks back and says, "Would you please give me a chance to answer?" And then they say, "Well, Rand Paul's mean-spirited. He's being mean," when he's being cornered by these Fox News reporters and set up to look like he's belligerent or disrespectful to the media. And it's all a setup. So this is something else they're doing. And of course, he has to be completely in line with the Zionists and the Israelis. This is another litmus test that the media is trying to give Rand Paul. And this doesn't mean Rand is perfect, but he is cut from a different cloth of your Jeb Bushes or your Hillary Clintons. So an interesting one to watch.
Okay, and another one who has decided to declare is Marco Rubio, who I understand is Cuban-American.
That's correct.
I don't know if there's any coincidence with the sudden cozying up with Cuba that the U.S. administration seems to be doing. But anyway, he's of course drawing. Well, this headline, for example, saying perplexes. They're talking about his campaign logo, and they're focusing on the silly little United States that's sitting above the I. But of much more interest, of course, on his campaign logo is his catchphrase, which is a new American century, which of course everybody is going to associate with the think tank, the Project for a New American Century, which of course, as we know, is utterly neoconservative and absolutely not non-interventionist, as interventionist as it can get, really. And
that's correct.
So I mean, do you have any thoughts on this guy? I mean, he is a junior senator, so you're calling him a freshman. But I mean, what are his chances? Is he really there as cannon fodder, or has he got a serious bid to make?
He's a little bit of a harder read than the power-grabbing Hillary Clinton or the reasonably principled Rand Paul. I think part of this, and it's a little early to confirm this, is just to clutter the field to make it harder for Rand Paul to stick out amongst the Senate Republicans throwing their hat in the ring for presidency. You also have the Texas senator, another one that's barely been in the Senate, Ted Cruz. And that's one general thing I'll mention real quick is Rand Paul, Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz. They've barely even gotten their seats warm in the Senate, and they all want to be president at the same time. Now, you got to spend megabucks to be U.S. president in this cult of personality, and only one person every 4 or 8 years could even think about making it and making that huge financial hurdle and passing all those litmus tests that I mentioned. You know, you have to support the Zionist and the whole Israeli Defense Forces and Netanyahu and all these issues. You can't be an isolationist in all this. So you have this crowded field thing with Cruz and Rubio and Paul and whatnot. But then, yeah, if you look at Rubio individually, a lot more questions come to mind than answers. You know, the Project for a New American Century is a specific thing that you mentioned, Mike, and his slogan may simply be a takeoff on that. But from what I've seen of Rubio, he's largely a chip off the old block of that philosophy, the idea that America must be the world imperium, that we're the enforcement arm to make everyone join the neoliberal capitalist system. And so, you know, Rubio, although he's young and fairly bright, I think he believes in that American exceptionalism that undergirds the neoconservative movement. The idea that America is the shining city on the hill that can do no wrong with its drone strikes hither and yon everywhere, indiscriminately killing non-combatants left, right, and center. So, you know, Rand Paul is much more versed in the Constitution, at least, and much more intelligent and erudite about all the issues. Rubio is kind of a deer in the headlights. I just think that he's too green for this, even if he was a good guy.
So is Jeb Bush going to declare, do you think?
Probably. You know, the way the Republican Party works here in America is they always have to have their establishmentarian, you know, their establishment candidate that's emblematic of the national Republican idea of what constitutes conservatism. But, you know, to them, they want to conserve the power of the big banks. They want to conserve the power of the munitions makers to fight constant wars. They're not conserving the Constitution. They wipe their feet on that. And so people like Rand Paul, they view that as someone from almost another party. He's not just a radical within the GOP. He's really, to them, someone from another party altogether. And that's what we actually need in the U.S. in part, is we need more political parties rather than everyone trying to cram themselves under the GOP big tent, which is ridiculous. So, you know, yeah, I think Jeb Bush will run so they have their bona fide establishment guy to take on Hillary Clinton in this big shadow boxing we have in the United States, you know, every time we want to elect a president.
And if we were to get Jeb Bush, would that mean a Rumsfeld and Cheney sort of backroom again, or are they finally gone from the political scene?
The only thing that's going to make them gone is literally their age. I think their influence is still there to a point. There's articles appearing in the press now about looking back and deciding that Dick Cheney was this sage, august statesman that made tough calls amid harrowing circumstances and was this wise, seasoned guy in office, which is pretty easy to poke holes at. Maybe we don't have time for that today. But at any rate, it's clear that they're going to probably want their establishment guy, John Edward Bush, i.e. Jeb. That's what Jeb stands for, John Edward. And that would be a third Bush.
Yes.
George Herbert Walker, George W., and then another one. We were worried about George III 200 and some years ago. This is far worse. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Okay, well, look, let's move on from that then. Change of subject. One of the other things that you wanted me to mention today was an article that we put in the most recent UK column newspaper called "The Future of Journalism is Automated," and this was discussing a company called Automated Insights, which is doing work for Associated Press and others with their Wordsmith program, and what they're basically doing is taking press releases and other data sources and automatically generating news reports from that, and they're producing thousands of these things every day, actually. So what were your thoughts on this, and why were you thinking of that you wanted to cover this subject today?
Well, I think it's interesting that this comes along right now when we had the incident with the Brian Williams, the NBC anchor, having lied about some military reporting adventures. And we're seeing what we're seeing in America, Mike, is this story that can barely prevent itself from breaking out. And that is that the media, the world media, I think what we're beginning to see here, along with this automation, are literally telling lies on a huge, massive scale, not just distorting, not just omitting, but cutting lies right out of whole cloth.
Sorry, just before we go on, just to let people know what that story, remind people about that story. This guy claimed that he was in a helicopter in Afghanistan that had been shot down, and in fact it turned out that he wasn't in that helicopter at all. Isn't that right? He arrived sort of 30 minutes later in a completely separate transport.
Correct. He admitted that it was a total lie, not just an omission or a distortion. And I think what I'm seeing is signs that this is emblematic of a picture where the media isn't just functioning as a propaganda for the world establishment, but is literally such a thing in a much more pervasive and wholesale way than we realize. And what I'm saying with automated journalism is now we're seeing the logical extension of a world establishment media built on a wide-ranging fabric of lies. Isn't it just almost the expected thing, Mike, that now we're looking at news written by robots where no human hand plays a role in writing news? As you've reported in the UK column, and as I've expanded on recently here, we're looking at Associated Press working with Automated Insights, which is the same initials as artificial intelligence, interestingly enough, AI. And we have Automated Insights starting with market reports and short business reports that are relatively straightforward and kind of brief, and these being completely written by robo-reporters, no human hand. But then Automated Insights, which is based in Durham, North Carolina, their chief product officer, Joe Procopio, in the spring of 2014, he spoke at Columbia University at a digital journalism conference. And Columbia University, as many people know, has a big journalism school there. They have for a long time. And he covered the robot reporter trend. That's what he called it. And he said, the 4 years of work I've done created over 100 million automated stories via Automated Insights. So in four years, he's worked at creating 100 million automated stories where no human hand played a role.
So, I mean, obviously, human journalists, as dumbed down as they've become and as following the sort of editorial, they don't step outside the box, as it were. There still are the Gary Webbs of the world and the people that he broke the Iran-Contra story and people like that. There still are decent investigative journalists out there who are prepared to take a risk, and his career and eventually his life was destroyed by breaking Iran-Contra. So, I mean, what is that part of what they're trying to do here? Just absolutely remove any human choices from journalism so that actually truth can never emerge?
Well, it certainly could have that effect. Now, whether they have that in mind remains to be seen. I don't want to jump the gun here and say things that aren't true. Then we're no better than them.
Yeah.
But it would clearly have the effect of more and more stories becoming automated in their composition, and just by sheer numbers alone, by the way that cuts into wages, that it reduces production costs for big media, just the economics alone and the technology clearly would have a crowding out effect. And right now what they're saying is that, hey, we can do all these boring, bland financial reports in an automated way with no human hand. And that frees up reporters, they say, to do the more enterprising investigative stories. And that's true. I don't want to be totally jaundiced about this. There's some truth to that.
Well, I would agree with you if we were actually seeing that investigative journalism happening. But this has been running now for a year, and I don't see the new investigative journalism taking place. So where is it?
Right, exactly. In theory, you would think it would free up journalists to do more important stories. But in practice, as you're saying, Mike, it's very little in the way of actual results are coming about. Because what this automated insights guy, Joe Procopio, also said is he described those 100 million stories in 4 years as unique and professionally written. This is an exact quote, covering everything from news to finance to sports to marketing and beyond. In fact, he added, by the time 2014 is over, and 2014 just ended, this conference was a while back, AI, Automated Insights, will have produced over 1 billion automated articles. 1 billion.
Yeah.
So sheer numbers alone would tell us that if it covers everything from marketing to sports and beyond, his own words, that would very strongly suggest that this is a big footprint that would displace, like a huge ship entering a shallow body of water, would displace all the regular and normal journalism and make this huge footprint for artificial intelligence journalism. And it's just a predictable, almost Bilderbergish trend, is it not? Bilderberg has Google meeting, in their meetings. And this just has that faint whiff of Bilderberg manipulation where they bring all these people from all these different fields together and they do these global coordination plans at the Bilderberg meeting every year. You can't prove it, but this has that whiff to it. It has that smell.
Okay, well, look. Speaking of Bilderberg, we're basically running out of time here, Mark. So we will mention Bilderberg, and of course, you have kindly sent us this article, which is up on the column front page at the moment. That the dates have been confirmed. It is going to be at Innsbruck, and what else can you tell us?
Well, beyond what that article says, there's not much to report new that I can confirm. It would be too speculative, but I would surmise, I stress the word surmise at this point, that Ukraine, like last year in Denmark, and the situation with Iran will certainly be up there, especially with regards to natural resources. Bilderbergers with Royal Dutch Shell there every year are real big on commandeering and controlling the world's natural resources, oil, natural gas. Of course, that plays into cornering Putin, because the more they can get Europe not to buy Putin's natural gas, the more the Bilderbergs and their birds of a feather that flock together, the more that they can control resources. And resource control is always a big adjunct or a big component of Bilderberg. But the article pretty much speaks for the basic framework of what we know now. And I'll be digging soon, and I can report back in your show more specifics in the coming next week or two, what they're up to and more about their meeting in Austria there in June.
And you will be there, will you?
I expect to. The fundraising hopefully will go as well as it has in past years, and I fully intend to be there, and all indications are that I will be, yes.
Okay, brilliant. Look, Mark, thank you very much for joining us once again, and hopefully we'll see you same time next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.